You're starting the recording. Good.
Yes.
You're so technological on your side of the country. I just really appreciate it.
Well, that's because you don't know how to push the play button. And it's like,
No,
what's
play.
this thing?
That's the problem. Don't hit play, hit record. Record is differently than play. Anyway, podcast 11, Gripping Reality. Get a grip. I mean, you should. You ought to get a grip on reality. In my opinion,
should honor months. I understand that.
get a grip on reality. Gripping Reality is the name of this podcast. West Coast Mike, East Coast Mike. You figure out which one is which one. But I'm West Coast. No, wait a minute. Today, I'm East
Coast.
But I was in the West earlier today.
Okay.
So, anyway, today, podcast 11. And our topic is the hottest topic of the day, which was yesterday, day before yesterday, whenever, this week, the
2 days ago,
enthusiastic supporters of the previous administration decided that they were going to make their voices heard in the Capitol. And they crossed the thresholds and the window lintels to enter the Capitol in force, and overtook the count of the vote. So that is a metaphor.
First time the Capitol's been breached since 1812.
Yeah, and the British did that to us, and we have some British friends who actually might be watching, and we love you personally. But you set a precedent it took us 108 years to catch up to. So the reality is the events of this week will go down the history books as history. This is part of now our history. And the issue that we're raising today is not whether Trump was a good president, a bad president, the absolute best president, the utter worst president, or Joe Biden is any of the above, or any other president subsequent or previous to this administration. We asked 2 questions on this podcast. As a matter of fact, if you get these 2 questions, I probably should not say this and I'll be chided for it, which is a good verb. I will be chided for that by my counterpart. If you get these 2 questions, you don't need to listen to us anymore, because this is all we really have to say, plus other things that we might want to communicate over time. But these are the 2 questions. What is the event, the experience, the moment, the emotion? What is the thing? I hate that word, but it's all-inclusive. What is this doing to you? And second question,
what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it?
Those really are the 2 key questions. When an event occurs, I don't care what it is, flat tire on the way to an important meeting, flat tire in your driveway, and you have no important meeting. It doesn't make any difference. When you walk out and you encounter an event, what does that do to you? Now, you can blame everybody else. You can talk around and around in circles as to who set you up, where did it come from, what is everybody else in the world thinking about. But if you want to get to the point where you're resolving issues that are really important, working through them, getting a grip on your reality, these 2 questions are the ones that are going to be vital. What is this doing to me? What am I going to do with it? So that takes you in 2 different directions. It takes you not so much into the deep, deep past, but into the current event that you are dealing with. What does this do to me right now? What's it engaging? What's it connecting with? What's it violating? Where's the friction? Where's the challenge? Where's the joy? Whatever your reaction is, whatever your thoughts are. And the second question moves you into an intentional future. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do about it? What can you do with it? So we're talking about the challenges and conflicts, the friction that arises where friendships are dissolved, family events are broken up. In fact, families are separated and won't speak to each other. Churches are being split apart organizations, service organizations like Rotary or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or food shelves, political council, it doesn't matter what it is. Human beings have really divided opinions, viewpoints, cultures on this. And it's not just mere diversity, it's actual division. Those diversity and division both start with DIV, but after that point, they're very, very different.
Yep, that's right. That's
so
right.
What
and
we're talking about.
And what's happening is this we've talked about before, and we're going to continue, is this us and them antagonistic, protagonistic kind of thing that's going on. And somehow in our thinking as a culture, as a civilization, if you will, it has become disjointed. We've lost that deep sense of community, and the angst about.
What do you mean by community? They've lost community. What does that mean? That word.
The community of the sense of being able to come together with the diverse perspectives of life. Well, we have a common dignity towards each other that says, I value you. It doesn't really matter what your opinions are, but I value you as a person. And so my response to you, what can I do about it, is my response to you is one that's dignified, that is one that is trying to understand, that is one that says there are greater values over the one that I'm trying to do from a standpoint of politics or whatever. The greater value is the value of you.
All right. So before we start talking about healing the division or celebrating the diversity, before we start talking about that split, do we need to start talking about how do you create your values of people? Because I think you're right. People say, I don't value you. I don't want to give the other side dignity, because if I do, I'm saying your opinion or your view or your stance is right or at least valid. And I'm encountering people who say, I don't want to even communicate that. So it's not that your idea is worthless. It's the value of you are worthless. Right. Do we need to start this conversation there?
Yeah, I think we do. I think we need to back up, because that's gotten us into this whole sense of us and them. We've lost the concept of dignity, and that how have we gotten, where did this come from? How did we get to this point of fact that somehow this group of people, or my viewpoint, or all of this perspective, the value is much higher than the dignity of the individual? And where did that come? How did we get there?
So what's your theory on that? Where did that come from? When did that start? When did you start experiencing the reduction of the value of persons and the ascension of the value of a viewpoint, or even if we say the ascension of values in separation, we'll call that, if it becomes very rigid, it's their culture, personal culture. So where does the rise of personal culture replace or interfere with the value of persons? When do you see that starting?
Well, we're going to give a little.
I mean, other with Adam and Eve. I mean, we can go all the way back to the beginning.
We're going to give a little cultural socialization, sociology lesson here on how this stuff comes together.
Okay, students, get your note paper out. There's going to be a quiz on this.
Exactly.
Professor Mike is going to start doing sociology class. It's only going to last about 5 minutes. Go.
Yeah, it's nothing, that probably you don't know, but you don't know it. What people don't understand is, if you go back and we look at, let's take a look at how law has been developed over the last since, and I would say probably safely we can go back to after the World War II, at the beginning of the 50s.
How law, LAW?
LAW, and how
Are we going back to
started taking.
Hammurabi? Are we doing Sumerians, ancient
No,
Egyptians? No,
no,
we're
no,
not
we're
going
not
that
doing.
far
We're
back.
going 1950s
Okay, 1950s.
and moving to the. So what happens in sociology is that there is a sociological norm that's considered the center of where we're at.
I know a
And
guy named.
then, yeah, right. So then, excuse me, what happens is that there becomes a change, what we would call abnormal, or a change that pushes the pendulum to the left or the right, depending on the value structure.
All right, give me an example.
Hyperconservative,
You lost
hy-
me.
okay, hyperconservatism or hyper liberalism.
Liberalism.
Okay,
Okay, but I need a
so
topic. What's a topic?
let's use what can I use that
Alcohol use?
yeah, that'll work. So
So the
alcohol
pendulum
use
swung to prohibition.
prohibition in the 30s, which was nobody should have a drink or drop.
Not a
Okay,
bit, not a single
not a
drop.
bit. Then it
It's
swung back.
illegal. You can be put in jail for producing or even owning or
Right.
possessing alcohol.
So sociologically, what happened is that our society swung way over here,
Right.
but it never comes back to center. All right, it never comes back to the norm that was there before.
Okay.
So what it does is it swings most of the time like halfway back. Now we have prohibition. We have all of those things that are going with it. Some of the hyper ultra conservative stuff is being disregarded. Then what happens? We swing to the left because prohibition's not working. And people are, they're bootlegging, they're doing all those things. We've got all of the racketeering, we've got, Al Capone, we've got all those people. So now the country is swinging to the left and wanting to make everything free. And
So
go,
what you're saying is Democrats are drunks. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with Democrats.
We are not saying that. Don't take that one clip out and put it on Facebook and say, these guys think all Democrats are drunks. We don't think that. Just most of them.
What happens is it doesn't swing back to the middle again. It swings halfway back. That's the new norm.
Well, when we use the metaphor of a pendulum, pendulums swing left and right and left, right. They never stop in the middle.
Right. But from this picture, now we have the new norm, which is the clock is stopped. We're in the middle, but it's the middle from this side, from the left, not where we were before. And so that's how culture, when we start down that road of developing, I would say when you start developing principle and value based on opinion and not based on something else that is more concrete, that has more substance to it, then we get into what? We get into the 60s. And what was the 60s?
Fun.
What happened in the 60s? Yeah. And it was what? Yeah, it was all about
experiences and fun and wild.
Right. Yeah, it was all about rock and roll. It was about sex. It was about drugs. It was anti-authority, anti-anything establishment. I mean, you remember those phrases? I remember those phrases.
I learned how to spell anti-disestablishmentarianism is the longest word in the English language. Exactly. And now it's pneumoneutral microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. And the problem is kids who are just learning how to spell cat.
Stop.
I'm not making those words up. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I mean, there's certain words that just are necessary to work into your vocabulary just so you have an intelligent sound. And COVID creates pneumoneutral microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. Actually, that's from people who live near volcanoes that blow up and they get lung disease.
Okay. I'm feeling much better about this.
Great.
I'm so enlightened. Okay. So consequently, though, what happens? Well, we moved 60s and the pendulum swung, and it never came back. And then it kept swinging, if you will, from the standpoint, if you say, when did this start? I would say it started at the time when there was a revolt against the established bedrock of principle, against the family. I mean, all those things that were that are and that had kept us as a country and as a culture centered on the dignity of individual in the community. And so we began to chip away at that full sense of, and well, you can't tell me what to do. And because if you tell me what to do, then I mean, I can't tell you what to do, because then you could tell me what to do, and I want to do whatever I want to do over. And that becomes a very, very slippery slope when it comes to civilization, because at what point do we finally say, if there's not some bedrock? And that's the thing that's happening right now, is that people are yelling and literally are up in arms about what the Constitution says, and they are fearful because they feel like no one is listening. And what happened to us,
But no one is
I
listening.
think
I
the
mean, part what you're quoting from the Constitution.
consequences.
Here's one of the issues. How many people who are at this point of division, not just diversity, but division, actually have read and understood the words of the Constitution? We were,
Oh,
we have people that are, the claim right now is we're in a constitutional crisis. Who actually knows what a
right,
constitutional crisis is? So back up.
exactly.
There was a show on in the 80s or 90s called Malcolm in the Middle. And Malcolm in the Middle
Yes,
had as its phrase, "You're not the boss of me." It was the kid who's in the middle
right,
that said to his siblings and his parents and his teachers
right.
and everybody in the world, "You're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do." So the whole problem in American culture is Malcolm in the Middle. If that show had never been on TV, we would not have this problem. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, the problem would still be there,
So that was
because
an expression of the problem.
well, yeah, but it's just like okay, a really good example is that we talk about when no one wants to be under that authority. They want to be under rule of law, if you will, to tell me what to do. It's very much akin to what, in a home, in a family. I'm a teenager and my room is an absolute disaster. I know it needs to be cleaned, and it's this pigsty, and I decide I'm going to go clean my room, right? And I get up and I'm getting ready to go because it's my decision to do that. And on the way to go clean my room, my mom catches me, and what does she say? You'll love this. Really need to go clean your room. Now, what do I do at that point? As
You're a
a human
teenager
being,
confronting your mother in the hallway who just said you need to clean your room, but you've
and
already
I was,
decided to go clean your room. So you sweetly say to your mother, "Mom, that's exactly what I was going to do. We have telepathy. We are on sync with each other, Mom. This is amazing. I came out of your body. Please don't laugh, Mom. I came out of your body and we still have this vital connection where you're thinking clean your room and I am also thinking clean my room." And this is one of those great moments in the psychic world of moms and sons that alignment has happened. We call that syzygy. Is that what you're saying?
no,
No?
because I that would not even begin to enter anything in that conversation, because you would have done a 180 at that point and walked in the opposite direction and left the house,
With my mom
slamming the door.
screaming behind me so the
Yeah,
neighbors
with
can
her
hear?
screaming, and you slam the door, and she's saying, "Don't you dare walk away from me!"
And so as neighbors are looking out the window and I say, "Moms, you know what they're like," and they all nod their heads, that's the breakdown of society.
Exactly. That's
Okay,
it, right there.
simple solution. every child should wear a uniform to school. Now you only need to have one set of clothes. Your room will never be a mess again. I have solved the world's problems.
Oh God, man! If
No,
anybody actually listens to this thing, Chris, through, it will be amazing.
we probably just lost them.
Don't leave, really. Please don't leave.
Especially
We
the
actually can make.
Catholics. The Catholics that have to wear uniforms to school. The girls have all these different color hair ties just so they can have individuality. Who rolls their Catholic socks down far on their legs so more leg shows? They're wearing the proper
All
socks.
right, enough.
Stop.
Enough in the weeds.
All right.
Stop, really. Jeez.
Really.
So, but the reality of it is that we don't. Nobody.
Wait,
Nobody
let's
wants
get
to be
back.
told what to do.
Wait, we got to go back to the original conversation, which is not the division. We're talking about the value of persons and how does a value become established in a person's life so that that actually affects their behavior. I mean, one of the things we teach about the complexes is that our perceptions interact with our emotions, and our emotions are a link into our motivations. Right now, we're talking about the motivation of value and how we look at other persons who are not in our homogenized group.
Right.
Homogenization is really good for milk, and it is really bad for human society.
Right.
Because homogenization says everyone who is different from me is eliminated, and only that which aligns with my identity, my thoughts, my value, my color, my wealth, my education, my understanding of the world, only those people are in my group, and everything else is homogenized out. They're separated.
And so
what do we do with that?
Let's go back to that perspective of how we develop value, because it ties into what I'm saying. Is
we're still in sociology class. Go.
We are. So we're developing a value system. At the same time, during that period of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, we developed not only this sense of throw everything off and it's about me and I get to have my self gratification. I don't care what it costs you, but I'm going to get my self gratification. But at the same time, and this is not a rant against or anybody else or TV, it's just that people don't, I think, really do not understand. At the same time became this intrinsic communication media that they no longer had to picture in their mind. The radio was voice, and so when they told stories and read stories and they did acting on the radio, you heard that, but your mind filled in all of the story and gave pictures to the storyline that was going on. Well, when we moved from there to the visual, then we stopped facilitating the imagination, and our perceptions started to become what we were seeing consistently in front of us on this two-dimensional at best. That became the enculturator and the value development in so many people's lives, because now there's this medium that consistently is telling me what I should believe in my perception.
Okay, so jump from the Howdy Doody show and Andy of Mayberry, which are still on Nickelodeon and MeTV. So jump from there to how do I get to devaluing people who are different from I am in the 2020s?
Okay.
I mean, because a ton of people who might be watching this weren't even born when 9/11/01 happened. So that, I mean, in living color, we were able to watch the death of 3,000 people.
Right. So what happened is what has happened in that process. Let's think about in the sense of desensitization, because now when you have received so much of this visualization that someone else has produced for you, and they have crafted their perspective of what you are going to see.
Okay.
So their value system is coming to you.
And why did they craft that? Why did they craft that image for me to see?
they crafted it because they knew that it would attract. It was, the sexual stuff was erotic. The violence was motivational from the standpoint of excitement and adrenaline and mystery and all those kinds of things that were there.
Yeah, but
And
I watched
then,
Captain Kangaroo and he was really nice. There were other kids that grew up watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and that was all crafted image as well. But the same value is behind the violent stuff you're talking about, and Captain Kangaroo and Mr. Rogers and Daniel Tiger today, the same value behind that. Why was that crafted for me to watch and
because
draws me in so I'm almost addicted to it? Why was that done?
because well, that was a lot of, just plain simple, had to do with what sold
What
and
sells?
what
Economics. Are we following the money here?
watched. What's that? It was economics. Yeah, very much so.
So we moved
But
out of sociology into economics?
no,
Okay,
we did
students,
not,
put your notebook
because
away. Get a different notebook out. We're in
no,
economics
no,
now.
keep the picking notebook out because we're continue to talk.
Don't yell at me. You're not the boss of
Yeah.
me. Oh, wait, that's what we're talking about. Where's my pencil?
But
I need a
that
pencil. I got to
became
take some notes here.
that became that became really the socialization factor that had powerful images on us. Then we went, at the same time as we were now moving into more graphic kinds of visualization that was going on that took away. There really was no imagination. We not only were doing that on the entertainment side, which fed me, but now we started to do that on the news side. So today, you say, well, it's working because we have desensitized ourselves and we have pulled in a perception as allowed to desensitize to the point where we have moved ourselves. I used to use that allows us to get into that us and them. Let me give you a really good example. People don't know this, but Google it, and you can Google the storylines and what went on. There is a thing that is known in the military. They have, and people don't want to know this, they want to hear this, but what they don't understand is there is actually a school subject that's called killology. And what happened between the Korean War and the Vietnam War was that the army, the military, found out that they were having the kill rate, which is, this is awful stuff, but the kill rate between the Korean War and the Vietnam War was dismal, because the Korean War, they did, I can't remember the specific numbers, but it was something around when they would be in a battle, there would be a 5% kill rate or 10% kill rate. Got the Vietnam War thing, and they had to figure out a way to fix that. So what?
To make it a higher rate or a lower rate?
Don't realize higher rate, because if you're going to war, the only way you're going to win is to kill those guys, right?
No.
That's the idea here.
No, that's not right.
The enemy. You're going to kill the enemy.
I understand that. But the actual way you win a war is you wound people and don't kill them. Because they can't leave a wounded comrade on the field. They've got to take them in. And now, if you have a dead soldier, you can leave them there and they're dead. But if you wound them, no, wait. I'm going somewhere with this. If you wound them, now you have to draw them off. Right. So now you disable the enemy by having so many wounded people that you're trying to completely crush their systems. And
Okay,
that I mean, it's
let me
interesting to
finish my
study,
illustration
right? It's
because this is the real
interesting to
illustration.
right. So the
So,
devalue of a person
so what
is
happened though? They had to figure out to get a higher kill rate.
okay.
Fast forward, so they did. Now, do you know how they got it?
I have no idea.
Video games.
Oh, really?
Okay, so do you remember? I'll give you a really good example of this. Do you remember when there was those two boys in Arkansas that were in the woods at this school and they shot and killed what 7 people on the playground?
I remember
I mean,
that.
this was clear back, real back in the 80s, I think, or
We're
90s.
not
I don't
talking
remember,
about
but it was
Columbine. Columbine was
no,
99.
not
So this
Columbine.
is
No,
before that.
these were two young men who were in the woods that were 150 yards away from the school
A
grounds,
playground.
and
Okay.
they killed 7, I think, wounded like 4. Now, here's the fascinating thing about this. It's in this article. It's very fascinating. They had never fired a real gun. They
Okay.
never fired a real rifle. So their kill rate in the terminology was what 89%, I believe, is what it was. In the number of times they fired and the number of people they killed, it was like 89%. The people were just baffled by this because they couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
So they called in the guys from the military and asked them that were in charge of the School of Killology and asked them to help them figure out why their kill rate was so high. And what they discovered when they went to these guys' house. Now, this is not anti-plane, you know, Force 11 or whatever it is and all
Sure
that
it
stuff.
is.
I'm
I
not
have the
saying
solution. I have the solution. We got to find out who invented video games and bring them up on crimes against humanity. Take them to the Hague. Take them to the Hague and have them. We're going to have some of these video game players execute them. I think
anyway.
that's a good idea. Okay, so keep going.
So that's how
Don't
those
let
guys
me
were able to.
interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how those guys were able to do it because they had been playing
Okay. All right.
endless games.
Go from there and
Now,
use some tape and get that back to why don't people have a value of another opinion other than their own homogenized view?
because what's happened in that value system for us is we come back to that whole thing. If we're talking about dignity of the person, we're talking about the fact that I can be other oriented and I live in a culture that's other oriented far more than it's self oriented. And whatever is the baseline that brings that about in my life and in my community, that we are other oriented. Amish community, take a look at them. They're other oriented. Why? Well, because they have a biblical, if you will, view that says this is how we live, and the other person, other orientation is critical. When we allowed,
All
when
right,
we
but
allowed,
what you brought up Amish. So the question is, are they actually other oriented or are they so self-oriented to their own homogenized group that they associate only with their own kind? And as I drive by Amish communities, children on bicycles, as I'm going by on my car or my motorcycle or my truck, look at me like I'm an alien from an outside world, and and there's no interaction. They are totally closed off from the world. Isn't
okay,
that the opposite example?
you can answer that later. So we have done though, regardless if we look at that, doesn't really matter to me, is that when we have moved away from the other orientation of dignity of the other person, but now what's rushed into our lives over the last 50 years, the last 40, 60 years, we have become so desensitized. You asked the question, why is it we can watch planes fly into the buildings crush. We know people are dying in there. And it's like, wow, that's great special effects because we've become so desensitized to real humanities. Why is it?
But I think that's really overgeneralized because the people that now I live in New York and you live in Washington. So for me as a New Yorker, I'm 400 miles from New York City. So I couldn't see the smoke. I couldn't hear the sound of the planes. The asbestos and all the stuff that was in those buildings didn't affect me at all. But I'm a New Yorker. So the way when people I talk to who had never seen a person die, they were moved to tears to a gripping horror of the events of those days. And our church became a prayer center that was a magnet for people coming in, holding hands, weeping together, never seen each other. There was a sense of community that came in almost instantaneously from the night of 9/11, 2001, which many people watching may be too young to even have an idea of that. The optics of it created a sense of a need for community that lasted for months, but eventually it dissolved. And now we're at a place where people don't even want to watch that anymore. It's like, okay, that's old news. I don't want, that doesn't affect me.
This is why, one of the reasons why I like you. Gotcha. Because you just proved my point. And why did you prove my point?
How did I prove your point? Not why. Why is because I really love you and I want to prove your points. But how did I do that?
How did you prove your point? How did you prove my point? You
I
just
don't
proved
know.
my point. Oh, you just said it. We went from perception to reality.
Okay.
So in 9/11 in New York, hit the buildings crashed. For you folks in that part of the world, and for me too, I might add, I was sick. I was devastated because I've been to New York City. I was there the trade towers when they topped them out. Um, so that was tangible to me. That was real. It
Okay.
was not something that that my perceptions had been changed over the years about this just being a backdrop to a good movie or some other thing. It became real to me. And
Okay.
so all of a sudden, when it became real, then my perceptions changed because now it's affecting me deeply. But when now you say, well, but now it's like that's no big deal. Why? Because the redundancy of it coming back into my life and back into my life and back into my life has changed my value system that says, oh, one day a year, we're quiet for 60 minutes or 60 seconds or whatever it is, and we're good with that. Move on. So emotionally, in our emotional systems, what would we call that? I mean, where would we place all of that kind of thing? That's what we talk about all the time. But because we have allowed those things and you and I have talked multiple times about people not seeing things, not observing things. It's like, how can you not see that? Because we have allowed ourselves to continue to be socialized and with that perception of what I see in front of me. And so when things become more real graphically, when things are now put on the news that we would have never thought, because the dignity of those individuals is being lost by being beamed literally all over the world. People are putting things on social media that are unbelievable, and the level of self-deprivation and not having any self-respect. Why is that? Because now we're desensitizing and we just think what I'm doing is I'm putting it on here, and four of my friends are seeing it, and all of a sudden you got 1.5 million views of something you didn't want anybody to see. Well, but then that whole aspect causes me to develop a perception that turns into my value system that says 9/11, yeah, it was really awful. But there's whole things that are a lot more awful than that because I keep seeing them and they keep inundating me on a consistent basis,
Okay.
and it keeps degrading my system, my value system of dignity for the other individual.
Okay, so the first question that we posed in this podcast, which we've been posing in every podcast since history began, is what is this doing to me? So we've beaten that one to death. I mean, the reality is people say, yeah, desensitize me. I don't value other people as much. I live in a homogenized group. Everyone that is in my group is like me in some fashion. Okay, so we beat that one to death. And if you want to talk about it more, write some questions or whatever, we can entertain that. But there's a second question that we really haven't gotten to, and it is, what do I do with that? So if a person says, okay, I'm not changing my value system, I'm not even going to address that. I like my homogenized group, makes me feel good, and I feel safe when I'm among my own kind. And so when everyone responds back to me in the same way that I put out, then I'm confirmed, I'm affirmed, I'm reinforced. I'm good with that. And when somebody pushes back, that person is an enemy. That kind of person is destroying my reverie here, my little enclave or big enclave, and trying to say your viewpoint is wrong. That's an enemy to me, and I don't value that. So I don't value diversity. I value the division. I value the division. That's what really happened yesterday or Wednesday of this week, when there was a group of people supporting the previous administration, a small number out of 330 million people, and even out of the 70 million that voted for Donald Trump, there's a very, very small, slender, tiny sliver that has this evaluation of we're going to win regardless of what we need to do to accomplish that, dismissing the law, dismissing the Constitution, dismissing the vote of the people. That's all lies. I don't believe any of it. It's part of the conspiracy. How does a person get there, and what do they do with that? When that's the viewpoint, it is now, it's not just I value other people who hold the same opinion. This is now my culture. This is my identity. What do I do with that? And from the ordinary person's point of view, that there isn't much diversity in their actual lives. They live in neighborhoods with people all like them, white or black, poor or rich, educated or uneducated, world travelers or not everyone lives in some kind of setting that is so lacking in diversity. Many people, not everybody, but so many people do. I watch shows on television that are just like me. I don't travel much. I don't get out. And when I do, I stay with my own. I stay with my own kind. What am I supposed to do with that? If I want to change my value from division to diversity, and the pendulum is going to swing ever so that direction, maybe one step we need to, I'll finish my question because that's really hard to follow if I don't finish the question. And if I keep interrupting myself, then it's even worse. So I understand that. So how do I change a value of another single person or a group of people or the world at large from I resent the division to I celebrate the diversity? So the question, I think one of the questions is, what actually is division and what actually is diversity? So which one of those do you want to try and define?
I already spent 30 minutes doing the first one, and you've been doing nothing besides heckling me. It's like, you need to start answering some questions.
If I was going to heckle, I would make a sign and I would hold it up and get on YouTube. Oh, sorry. I am on YouTube. Right. So division. No, you didn't explain division.
I didn't say I explained it.
Yeah, you spent 30 minutes yapping about some kind of sociological economics that has to do with how watching Howdy Doody in black and white ruined the world. I understand that.
You're so anal sometimes. I can hardly stand it. It's awful.
That is a Freudian term, and most people have no idea what you're talking about. I unfortunately do, and I disagree with your assessment. Nonetheless, if you want to know what we're talking about, pause, then go to Google and Google anal retentive. It is not just anal; it is anal retentive. Anyway, when you're back, hit unpause, and you'll pick up this conversation right here. I hate it when people use psychological terms and only quote half of them.
God, I'm dying here. Okay.
So division.
Division.
So division is when two different viewpoints create enmity. There's a hatred. There is conflict that says one side to the other, I will not listen to you. I will not appreciate your thoughts. I will not listen. And we're calling that division. Diversity recognizes that there are differences of opinion, slight or major, doesn't matter, but those differences are celebrated as valuable to me. You do not hold the same viewpoint that I hold on many, many different topics. And that makes our relationship rich, it's engaging, it's exciting, because we'll stop listening long enough to actually listen and hear, and then consider, here's your viewpoint. Do I understand it correctly? You get to explain. And I say, I don't agree with that. I don't hold that opinion, but I respect that you do. Now we have diversity. And if we can get there on an individual basis, skip the whole world, we're not going to be able to solve that. But on an individual basis, my brother or sister sitting at the dining table with me, or that we have a conversation, or we're walking in the park, or we're going on an activity together, and there is something that actually is different, we have a choice in that moment. Does that divide me in discord, or do I celebrate the diversity? If I celebrate it, if I'm joyful over the difference, I'm going to let you express. I'm not going to try and change your viewpoint, and I may not even counter it, but it doesn't mean that I have to agree with it or go to your side. It merely means what you're offering in our relationship is as valuable as what I bring into our relationship. And when we see that they're different, but we celebrate that, we have diversity and not division. I think that's probably the solution.
Well, and I think one of the things that we were talking about this as you guys are watching and listening is that I want to make sure that you understand when we talk about diversity, we're talking about it in this form of what Mike just described. The tendency is going to be, even when we use that word, and I was going to say this a long time ago when you used that word, is that tends to be a word that people look as being a socialist word, a word that
diversity?
Is a liberal word. Diversity, yeah, diversity tends to be seen as like tolerance. That's gotten maybe not in your world, but out in our world, that's a very real thing.
Okay.
And so, but what you're talking about is exactly as holistic, that understanding of what that means. It doesn't mean diversity means that I have no value systems, I have no principles, I have, I just take whatever, whenever, and I'm happy with that. And oh, by the way, I'm going to take your stuff so I can make you happy. And we're not going to stand for anything really because we're diverse. I mean, you see the bumper stickers. I don't know if you've seen the bumper. Maybe you don't have them out there, but the bumper stickers that have all the different pictures of religious organizations, and it says
spell out coexist. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, and that's the mindset people have about diversity. And I'm going, no, we're not talking in that sense of a religious or
We're
political
not.
or whatever. Well, we are, but we're not. We're talking in a much more
We
holistic
are, but we're
perspective.
not. So we're
We're
talking out of both
talking
sides of
about
our mouth at the same time.
absolutely. We're talking about it in a much more holistic perspective of what you're sharing. Is that we hold we hold that, but the bottom line is that because we have a sense of other orientation and sacredness for each other. Having those conversations does not bother me because we don't hold the same views on everything. I mean, if nothing else today, while watching this podcast, I hope that's become obvious. We have literal and hard discussions that we're not afraid to have because that it's important for us that there's real richness of what you're saying. I like that term. Is that do I see my life being richer and fuller because I'm willing to engage with somebody in diversity, not in division, so that I can continue to grow and learn and to be someone that can make a difference in this world without being, without the anger and the bitterness and, all of the stuff that goes with that side of I'm going to protect my own and I don't care what you think. That becomes incredibly destructive. And I think that in of itself is what shook people so much, particularly people in the Capitol on Wednesday, was that perspective of it shook them, rocked them, because they saw something they'd never seen before. And they didn't know what to do with that.
Right.
Because many of them have caused that. I mean, we're part of the impetus of motivation for that to come together. And then all of a sudden they're realizing, wait a minute, this is not who we want to be.
Right.
This is ugly. We don't want this kind of thing, and this is not us. But so they were having to do a lot of self-reflection.
But there may be people who say that what we saw in the Capitol was so ugly, and there are other people who saw the exact same image and said, finally, somebody is standing up to the liberals that are running this world and the super elites that are destroying everything. And if it comes down to war, then by golly, we really need to have that. And I value winning more than I value listening.
Exactly.
So we got there. So at Thanksgiving tables, at least in my family, and maybe it's true in yours as well, there are 3 topics about which we are not permitted to talk: politics, religion, and money. You're not allowed to talk about those 3 things. The reality is those 3 topics are where so much of the division, the animosity, the hatred that has occurred, and even within what we call the Christian community, the whole issue of Jesus Christ is the only way to God. And if you don't believe that, the issues are eternal. So I have to win that conversation. If you hold a different view, I can't celebrate that. You have to be wrong. I have to be right. That's division. That we haven't addressed that. In politics, if you don't support Donald Trump, the whole world is going to be lost. If we go back to Barack Obama or we go on to Joe Biden, everything we've ever known is going to be destroyed. I have to win this one with money. The people who have accumulated all the wealth of the world, 10 people own more than 90%, 98%, 67%. The numbers keep changing. And the problem of money, I can't go to a movie because some super rich guy has $700 trillion in his stock portfolio. That's why I can't get ahead. If I don't win this one, the stakes are too high. And I think where we're not getting to is when the stakes are at that level, how do I address my value of you as a person when your viewpoint is in conflict with mine? And I make every subject we talk about fall into one of those three. Falls into religion, falls into politics, falls into money. And I can't think of another issue that has more automatic divisiveness than those three topics. I mean, there's tons of topics,
right?
But those three are the ones that become the true division, the split, the hatred, the animosity, the refusal to respect the dignity and value of racial conflicts, East and West, educated, uneducated, sexuality. All of those things come down to politics, religion, and money. Somehow they come down to that. So the question then is, what do we do with that? Do we do that in another podcast? Are people like worn out?
We're going to do that in episode 12, which is our next podcast, because that is a podcast in itself. And we want you to come back and we're going to continue this conversation so that you can grip reality, because that's what we're trying to help people do, to understand.
So some people watching at the conclusion of this podcast are saying, these guys are crazy. I don't want that. I don't want that in my life. Okay, so we did not convince you. But some of you are saying, I do that. When there's a difference, I have made it a division instead of a diversity. We're using all D words so you can remember what we're talking about. So,
can I write that down?
The next time you're on Facebook or in a conversation, or you're talking to your brother or sister, your mom or your dad, or anybody, a neighbor, a stranger, and there's a difference, you get to choose, is this going to be a division or is this going to be a diversity that I can celebrate the richness of my life, or I have to win this one?
Right.
So if you don't agree with that, we've lost you or we never had you. But if you do, here's the skill. Sense the difference. Choose diversity rather than division. And in a moment, if you say, you know, I could do that. Do you need to? Should you? We don't use those words. Can you? And will you?
And will you? That's exactly right. So you can visit us at grippingreality.com, and you can get a hold of us at.
You can send an email to Myke at grippingreality.com. And you can spell Myke with an I, meaning the other guy, or with a Y, meaning this guy. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to put West Coast Myke, East Coast Myke. You don't have to do any of that. You don't need our last names. You can put Myke at grippingreality.com, either one of us. And we share the email. So no matter what you write to Myke with an I or Myke to it with a Y, we're going to read the email. It just makes it easier on you so that you can send an email to us. And then we'll take those topics and we'll investigate. That's really what we're trying to do in Gripping Reality, is give you not only something to think about, but some skills that you can put into practice, or at least try, that will improve the quality of your life. That's really what we're all about.
Exactly. All right. So have a good one. Until next time, episode 12.
Episode 12 is coming up.
All right.